Joining me now from Capitol Hill, Democratic Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, a state that just announced, unfortunately, 8 new cases in the last hour, bringing the total there to 64. Senator, good to have you with us on this morning. Thank you very much for your time. Let me start by asking you, and we're about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours away from this scheduled vote. Can you give us a quick check just on where things stand as of right now? Are we going to see any major breakthroughs in the next 2.5 hours?
I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that the gap between Republicans and Democrats here in the Senate in terms of this big stimulus package have been closed in recent hours, but I don't know that yet. Let me start with what your previous interview just emphasized. There is a huge small business package, $350 billion, that has been worked out fully. This is bipartisan. It enjoys strong support. It will not just provide access to loans. Many of these loans will be grants if small businesses keep folks on their payroll or rehire folks onto their payroll who've just been let go. That's going to move very quickly, and that'll put some badly needed cash in the hands of small business owners, sole proprietors, nonprofits, folks that are absolutely critical to sustaining our communities and supporting our local economies. But there's some key differences that were not resolved as of last night. Support for state and county governments. That's who often employs the frontline public health workers, the paramedics, the folks who drive ambulances, the orderlies and the nurses in public hospitals. That was a gap that needed to be closed. And most critically, some transparency, some accountability around how this $500 billion Treasury Secretary-driven big corporate bailout fund is going to be run. My advice to my leadership is going to be, if we can't close the gap on the accountability and transparency of that big $500 billion fund, let's take the rest of this and pass it. The payments to individuals, the support for small business and nonprofits, things that'll put a floor under our economy, and in particular, the big expansion of unemployment insurance. So there's lots of parts of this bill that have been worked out on a bipartisan basis. We should be able to get this done today.
Let me go just through some of these points really quickly, and I want to get to a few of them, so I appreciate your time for this. But you're saying, walk us through some of the sticking points on the state and local governments issue that you've outlined. I mean, what is it that the Republicans are saying? They don't want to get money to state and local governments to address these ambulance drivers and others that you're saying you want to try to help? I mean, why would they also be against accountability and transparency, as you're putting it?
There was some concern that I heard from senior Republican senators that county governments and state governments would simply use these federal direct transfer funds to help fix their longstanding pension problems. I said, fine, put a restriction on it. Say that these funds can be used for COVID-19, for the direct impact on state and county budgets caused by the collapse in their sales tax receipts, the deferral of their ability to collect on personal income tax. When we push back by 2 months, the federal income tax, that pushes back most states by 2 months. And the dramatic increase in costs they're seeing for overtime and for public health workers. Fine, we can work this out, but there was not enough in the bill, at least as of last night, to support state and local governments. Counties and cities are bearing most of the burden of the immediate direct response, and states are going to be absolutely critical partners. If we don't backstop those governments, they won't be able to provide the support to our communities that we expect them to provide. This is why we have a federal government. Federal employees don't directly provide the immediate response to disasters. State and local government employees do. And then the federal government comes and provides the financial support after the hurricane, after the tornado. This is no different. This is a global pandemic where the folks we expect to be out there today, who are actually risking their lives to save other people's lives, are often public employees employed by cities, counties, and states.
Senator, let me ask you really quickly about something my colleague Garrett Haag brought up. You may have heard him. They're talking about it. The charge of Republicans are saying this is pretty much an election grab bag for Democrats. They're trying to ram in things that have nothing to do with the COVID-19 response. For example, canceling student debt loans.
I'll say this, some support for the semester delay that's going to happen in terms of student debts and support for higher education in terms of colleges and universities, those that don't have significant endowments. I do support that. I do think that we frankly need to make sure that the investments that we're going to make in our community through this bill directly support the workers, the families that are going to be most directly affected by COVID-19. We ought to focus on that menu and not on things beyond that. Both parties need to put down the partisan tools, quit the bickering, come to an agreement around things that will support our country in this pandemic crisis. And I frankly stand with the Democratic caucus on our values and our priorities in this bill. But at the end of the day, there is a lot of pressure on us to get this done today. That's why I think you'll see movement.
Let me, sir, get your final thoughts on Senator Rand Paul, a colleague of yours. He is now the first senator to test positive. But before he got the results back, it seems that he went to the Senate gym Sunday morning.
Yep.
He was out and about for the past week. We're not clear yet. We have not gotten an answer from his office as to when he actually took the test and whether or not he did any measures between then and getting the results yesterday. Your colleague, Senator Kristen Sinema, called that absolutely irresponsible. Did he put other senators at risk with his behavior over the past week or so?
Well, I'm not going to leap to that criticism. He is a physician. He's an ophthalmologist. It certainly seems as if it was irresponsible if he knew he might well be positive and was still going to the gym and interacting with folks. But at this point, we've got lots of other more pressing issues that we could be trying to resolve. I do think one of our core issues is voting. Voting here in Congress, we don't have a provision that allows us to vote remotely, so we are social distancing. Most of us are spending most of our time alone in our offices and using phones to communicate with each other or email. But we also don't have a provision that ensures vote by mail in November. Now, some might criticize that as a electioneering provision, but I think it's essential that this stimulus include funding and authorization for vote by mail, given that we've already seen 6 major states delay their presidential primaries. We need to ensure the American people that the November election will happen on time. We did this during the Civil War. We did it during the Second World War. We can vote during November, regardless of whether this pandemic is fully resolved by then or not.
All right, Senator Chris Coons, sir, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All right.